has a huge market in used medical supplies coming out of hospitals and research facilities and schools. Where is it going? Some of it's going to the third world, some of it's going back into the medical system, and some of it is just going somewhere. Okay, I got 15 minutes, all right. So I think, I was asked to give a prediction not too long ago, and the only one I could come up with and I was happy with is something like in 10 years we'll have $1 billion black market medical industry in America. Because poor people aren't allowed to see doctors in America, and they're going to see them eventually anyway. So, what else do we have going on here? We have modifying contacts. We have contacts now that allow you to, which isn't an incredible modification, but is something that are about to be implanted that allow you to see movement different and these sort of things. Often, again, with sports people use them. So vascular brain surgery, I'm going to take a second on this, which is right now like the cutting edge equipment that's coming out for brain surgery. It allows you to go through the artery in the leg up through and do laparoscopic vascular, which is very, very small work on the brain. I give it 5-10 years before those machines are on eBay and then underneath a meth lab somewhere. So we're going to be doing brain surgery in our houses. So as these things come up, we've got gene therapies coming down the line. We've got amazing stuff in gerontology that might allow us to live often twice as much. We're going to have this amazing triage issue in our societies, depending on how we define things, whether it's treatments or enhancements, on who gets them. The sick are allowed to be treated. Soldiers are allowed to be enhanced. That's why they get the Provigil. I talked about volition. But, and I'll try to roll through this real quick because this gets really weird. We're pretty close to having a vaccine for things like addiction. You don't think of addiction as something you would vaccinate for, but it is. It's a brain problem that you could potentially have a vaccination for. Vaccination, all the crack you want, because it's not that much crack, as it turns out. But addiction is a great case because it's a disease of volition, specifically. And so when we start talking about volition on our bodies, this is one thing, is whenever we're talking about body modification, we're talking about mind modification. That's just the cost that comes with being a plastic species. Anytime you change this, you change this. It just happens that way. And often you change this to change this. But to pretend that we can change this without changing this is not acknowledging the kind of species we are. So I don't know what becomes the idea of free will and volition when we can start to modify our bodies extensively. I don't know, what does it mean? Do you choose to not become an addict if you take the vaccine, or do you manage to, do you not find out who you are because you're not exposed to this particular risk? So, how to create a non-medical human market for altering ourselves? Or does it go to backroom enhancements for the poor and travel for the rich? One of the reasons that I'm kind of doing this talk and I'm interested in this subject is because this is coming, and there's various ways it could arrive. It could arrive in a nicely triaged manner in which we can do the things that we need to do, or it could arrive in a kind of backroom abortion style, where poor people are getting some sort of enhancements so that they can get jobs. And that sounds kind of science fiction and far-fetched, but it's not. It's not that far away. One of the things that people were trying to figure out if you could do with the magnets is if all electricians should get them or something like that to keep themselves safe. Well, it turns out no, because they're a really bad idea. but it was that kind of thing. It was like all of a sudden, does an electrician that has a way of sensing electricity have a market advantage over one that doesn't? Yes, of course they do. Well, does that suddenly become a requirement for the job? Well, we've always modified ourselves to be able to do our jobs, both physically and neurologically. So yes, we're looking at backroom enhancements so poor people can get jobs. So I'm driving through to the end of this at this point. Here's a few kind of modifications that people don't see very much. Like one of the interesting things that just happened, and I don't actually have it in the talk yet, is that one of the most difficult problems in body modification, like aesthetic body modification, is something called the transdermal, which doesn't poke all the way through. It just sits a little bit under the skin. If you've seen the guy with the mohawk, metal mohawk, that's a transdermal. And transdermals almost always reject. They're very hard to heal. They were just a failure as a procedure for the most part. They infect terribly because you have to form skin all around them and all that. It's basically an open wound. And if you start studying body modification or medicine, you discover that the enemy of everything is having the skin open. So interestingly, this is something both I've watched, the two prongs of medical research and body modification artists wrestling with this issue. And it looks like the body modders may have it cracked. They have something called a microdermal at this point, which they've just been trying out, which is a very, very small, looks like a door hinge, but really, really tiny, that they can slide under your skin. And it's got two holes, and your body kind of grows through it. And so far, there's been almost no rejection issues. And this is something I'm going to watch very, very carefully, because that into-out of skin interface is one of the things holding back a lot of people's ideas about what they want to have implanted in their bodies. Power source issues and light issues and all sorts of other wacky stuff. Mostly, I'm telling you this part to kind of get you thinking, because in general, the most interesting suggestions for what we could do have come from the audiences of these kinds of talks. So I want to hear your ideas about what kind of modifications you would like to see in your own body. So we're at the point now where we can take in data and output data to our bodies. That's kind of an awkward sentence, but so you consider things like neuroplasticity, you consider how we can enhance movement, senses, how we can find out more about what's going on in our bodies. Okay. No. And every time we find out something more about what's going on in our bodies, we get into a feedback loop. We love these feedback loops. Many of them are natural. You step on something, you say, ow, and you get off of it. That's a biofeedback loop. It increases when you can do something like continually read, say, your glucose or something like that, and say, when I eat this and go a bit crazy, it's because my insulin is spiking. Maybe not so much with a chocolate cake. But the other question is, how far is too far? Furries. And really, this is my last slide pretty much, and this kind of goes to the heart of the matter, and it's something which I don't have an answer for, and if I did, I would be lying to you on how far is too far. Really strange things with porn, but a lot of porn, I'm a big fan of porn. I have to say, nothing against porn here, but a lot of it is not very involved with volition and consent, which is my personal line, where I think people should lay off, is consent. And so the things that you could do to modify people for pornographic purposes could probably be pretty horrific. I don't know if we want to go there. I find furries horrific. I shouldn't, but sorry, it's like prejudicial on my part. We have these questions to ask about who gets to hurt themselves and how much. I have a really high pain tolerance at this point. I didn't used to. But if I had jumped into some of the things that I know how to do now from the beginning, that would have been very unhealthy. Fortunately, I was around the sort of people that could tell me that. What's not fair anymore? Is it okay for sports, people competing in sports to have LASIK but not steroids? What should be fair? What should be fair is such a ridiculous statement. There's like no data you can put in that. There's nothing, there's not going to be a scientific answer to that. But there is a societal one. We have to solve that. We have to answer that question. Or sports is going to become really boring when one guy has got everything. Not just sports, but in general, what's fair in the marketplace. But at the heart of all this, and the kind of there's a lot of people who kind of really don't want us to do these sorts of things that are writing books, which I'm forgetting the names of again. End of human, our post-human future or something like that. I'm looking for help and not getting over here. Anyway, the fundamental question to all of this is what counts as human? The question that people face with vaccination and birth control, body modification, and any of the things is, do you still count as human when you're done? Do you still count as human when you've started futzing with your brain? Do I still count as human now that I've had 6 senses? And not in a kind of, I can sense what your playing card is kind of way. I don't know. I don't know if I still count as human. Do I still count as, after we learned to read and write as a society, did we still count as human compared to the ones that came before? I don't know, because we're a very, very plastic species. So our brains were fundamentally different after we invented reading and writing to what they were before. So I guess I kind of will break off into hopefully discussion, questions and suggestions after the question of what counts as human, because as much as many of us are probably sitting in this room going, yeah, go, we could do anything, we're allowed, we're hacker types, we could do anything to ours, there's a line over which you'll go, no, that's too far. No, that's not human anymore. I don't like that. That line is going to be different for every person in this room. So on that note, I'd love to hear some questions or suggestions. What was it? LASIK. Oh, I'm sorry. What is LASIK? LASIK is the term for laser sculpting of the cornea for enhancing vision. So people can get often better than 20/20 vision by resculpting the cornea multiple times. So. Also, if anyone has any suggestions for wacky things I should put in my body over the next year, I'm not saying I'll do it. I'm taking suggestions.
Just a small question concerning your own implant with the magnet. What exactly went wrong there? Is it just an insulating material that
Yes.
broke up?
Yes, when the insulating material broke up, my body attacked it. It's a foreign thing, so my body...
So basically, if the initial bugs, well, I'm sorry. It's,
what was that?
I mean, if the initial bugs are fixed, I mean that that insulating
if they
material...
ever fix the sheathing problem,
Huh?
I'm getting another magnet in a heartbeat.
All right. Okay.
Is this on? Yeah. I think it would be very interesting to have something like EEG electrodes implanted in the skull or in the head, because not only for stuff like neurofeedback, but also to start work on something like a brain-computer interface.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it like an inductive sensor sounds like it could be doable. I'm going to take some notes. But I don't think if there's anything out there like that right now, but I can't off the top of my head think of why you couldn't do that.
You probably could add a, adrenaline meter, so you could live measure your personal reaction on stress and the different types of stress, and figure out what you can deal with and how much you can take and so on.
Measuring serotonin would be really, really difficult without killing yourself first. Like, well, where? Like, serotonin's all over the body, so like levels of serotonin. I mean, the way you'd want to test that is spinal fluid, and a sensor in the spinal fluid is a long way away at this point. No. Okay, is that everything then? Yeah.
I'm a bit frightened about debugging my brain-computer interface, so I'd like to start with modifying my rather sensitive parts to use them as a sensoric device, just as you did with the magnets. But with other sensory information, or just for generic communication with Bluetooth or so. I think I have heard of divers who monitor their oxygen levels of their of their bottles through a device they put under their tongue and so on.
So we have this idea that like neural signaling is the best way to do a brain-computer interface, and I'm not sure I agree. I actually used to have a lot about neural interface in this talk, and one of the reasons that I've kind of gotten rid of that is because neural interface is perfectly doable through feedback, and right now I think that's probably the better way to go. So in that idea that we use the same, and this isn't necessarily saying that we wouldn't have any implants, and I'm talking about, 10 years away we're doing brain surgery in our homes, that sort of thing, but But the idea of